Welcome, my beautiful friend. I say this all the time because all the people that I speak with, they are my friends, they're my colleagues, fellow humans in this. It's a journey. It's really on this journey that we've all embarked upon. And so again, I love having these conversations because it just really helps me to really connect with my community. And you're an important part of my community. So everyone, I want you to help me welcome Aisha. Aisha, I'm going to ask you just to, kind of say a few words about you as Aisha, just the individual, a little bit about your work. You do such beautiful work that I think my community would love to hear about from you. And yeah, and then we'll dive into our conversation on one of my favorite, and I'm not even saying this, it's what's sustained me for the better part of the last, well, my younger son is 27 this year. So I'm going to say, geez, easily 30, 31 years now. It's actually, I used to say 20, but it's way longer. We're going to talk about gratitude, but why don't you talk a little bit about your work, what it is that you do, and who you support?
Thank you so much, Phyllis, for having me. I am grateful to be here, my wonderful and very cherished friend, and so grateful that our online connection over the past few years has resulted in such a beautiful and wonderful friendship and collaboration. So I'm so grateful to be here. My name is Aisha Adami Mukweda, and I am a DEI strategist and personal, professional, and business coach. I operate from a trauma and grief informed background. So, really, I would say that the work that I do is very heart centered and very humanity forward. Um, I like to work with people who are really interested in making genuine and authentic change and who are willing to really step into the kind of messiness that goes with doing this work because a lot of people think that this is kind of easy and tick boxy, and it's not. When you're really doing it to create positive transformation and change, it can be messy, it can be difficult, and I'm there to bear witness and to support and to help people find their way through it to what is an authentic and an equitable and supportive and mutually beneficial and supportive space.
Mm, so beautifully said. And honestly, folks, this is Aisha. You've been doing this. I mean, we both share a public health advanced degree in public health. So you don't do public health without coming from a place of, justice and desire to help level the playing field, making sure that systems and societies and communities are really healthy for all people to thrive. So what you've just heard from Aisha is heart. Like this is work you've been doing. How long would you say you've been doing this work, Aisha? In
So
different capacities,
yes,
right?
absolutely. I would say, this, I've been fortunate to have a 20-year career in public health. I don't have the same educational background as yourself in public health, but my experience has been 20 years of leadership in a public health organization.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then five, I guess, going on over 5 years of work as a consultant. So, almost a quarter of a century of doing social justice advocacy and work. And as you say, trying to recognize and acknowledge not just what is working, but what's not working to level
Mm-hmm.
the field and make sure people have access and they have the ability to speak for themselves and have agency and be able to make really informed decisions about their own health.
That sounds like public health, really.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so again, I really appreciate you taking time, bringing all those years of experiences, both personal and professional, for us to have. Um, this topic that we're going to talk about gratitude as a superpower. And, I know that as we go through, we will see the lighter side of gratitude. I also know that we're going to see some of the heavier side of gratitude and the ability to stay grounded. And it's a practice for me and I know too for you, Aisha. So yeah, I'm hoping that when we pause here now, we're going to just go on this journey together and sort of hopefully some of the things that will come out will be of value to the rest of the community. So, having said all of what you've said there, the work that you've done, the decades of being a leader in the public health sphere, and because I know you, I know that those are things, as I said earlier, they're written in your DNA, they're on your heart, in your soul, and such. So, when did you know that you were this person?
I think that I'm a, like many, like many in our community, I'm someone who grew up with childhood trauma. And that, I think that experience kind of separated me from my classmates and my colleagues in school because I just looked at the world a little bit differently. I was someone who considered the human experience. I'll share with you that I think it was either in grade 5 or grade 6, I did a classroom book report on the book Sybil,
Mm,
woman with the multiple personalities and
hmm
the
hmm.
experiences she went through. And I remember the look on my teacher's face
Yeah, I
when,
would be surprised.
when I was talking about this in such a at such a young age, and
Hmm
in the context of my colleagues or my classmates who were talking about, the more adventuresome and fun books that they
Nancy Drew and Hardy
exactly
Boys, and right, Bobbsey Twins.
exactly right. So there was that, and then I also had the experience of actually living some of my early adulthood in my country of origin, which is Pakistan. Due to family circumstances, we went back and lived there for about 6 years.
Wow.
And so, from the age of, let's say, maybe 16 to about 22, I was there. And so, that is a very fragile, vulnerable time to
Hmm
be moving from one culture to another and not really recognizing your place in either, right? Because here, as a Canadian, uh, I was different because of my brown skin, because of my experience, because of my culture. And there in Pakistan, I was different because of the way I spoke English. Our family was known as the Canadians in our neighborhood. So we were in a place where everyone looked like me, but we were treated differently. So I
hmm
think that those are some of the experiences that really shaped how I came to social justice advocacy and the work that I do today.
So deeply profound, and a little bit surprised about the Sybil piece in grade 5. I must admit, I can't imagine the look on your teacher's
My
face.
teacher, I'll never forget her face. Let's just say we didn't have a lot of question and answer on that. That
hmm hmm And I'm really glad that you talked about trauma, and we don't need to go into your trauma. I wanted to just tease it out a little bit to acknowledge that some of us have been traumatized and we don't even know that we're living some degree of trauma, and on the surface we seem okay. And yet, when we look at certain aspects of our lives, I always break it down into the 4 pillars: mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. That's where we see some of these unresolved traumas showing up. And of course, you know this as a practitioner yourself. So I just wanted to put that out there that even if we don't know, and actually, I love Dr. Gabor Mate. So his area of specialty is in trauma, childhood,
yeah,
and he said every single one of us has some form or shape of childhood trauma, whether it's known or unknown. We have some degree childhood trauma.
I think you've really hit on something which is around the piece of unresolved. I would go a little bit further and say even unacknowledged,
Mm-hmm,
unrecognized,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
Because what happens is that we are just now kind of recognizing how the inequitable and the oppressive systems that we live in have actually normalized the experience of trauma for so many of us because of what we deal with systemically in these systems. And that, a lot of it is unrecognized, unacknowledged, unresolved because it's normalized,
mm-hmm,
because of the way we're socialized. today I mentioned to you that I did a post on grief. And what I talked about is how phrases like keep calm and carry on, it's time for you to move on, you need to get over it. That is, they are those kinds of adages and that kind of attitude that comes to us from a broad social perspective. That I think contributes to the normalization of trauma and
Hmm.
the inability of people to actually acknowledge and understand their own grief, and then to be able to mourn, which is the active expression of grief.
Yeah, yeah. Well said, and 100% in agreement. And I think it even what it does, it actually not only does it normalizes the trauma, but it gives permission not to talk about it. Or if, right, if you attempt to. So anyway, I 100% understanding that. So I see the grounding of what brought you to where you are today. And so because we're talking about gratitude, and I said earlier, we're going to have the lighter side of gratitude and there's deeper sides of gratitude, right? And everything in between. So it's a range that we're going to go through. So we're talking about gratitude as a superpower and as a way of helping us to maximize our full human potential. And I kind of want to know when I first approached you, how did this resonate with you? Was it a difficult yes to come to, or you said yes because you're my friend and my colleague? How did this resonate with you,
Well,
especially in the context of staying true to yourself, really? So,
absolutely. Yeah. Well, first of all, I will probably say a lot of yeses to you because you are my friend, you
oh,
know. But
back at you, by the way, right back at you.
oh, thank you so much. I think that, for me, this was really a no-brainer. I did in 2019 with a good friend of mine, Naila Lalani. We developed a course called The Revolutionary Power of Gratitude, because it is something that we both feel very strongly is not just, I'm not talking about gratitude as, you know, gratitude as deflection from reality. I'm talking about gratitude as a superpower, just exactly like you said, as a superpower, as a tool of empowerment, as a way, as actually a tool of resistance
Oh,
as well, right? So for me, no brainer. Gratitude is a part of my everyday. I begin my day with gratitude meditation. I'm constantly in a state of gratitude. Now, is that always a perfect state of gratitude? No, it's not. There are some times where I need to get to the gratitude, which takes me maybe 2 or 3 days, but
thank
that's
you.
okay. I know that I'm going to get there. Right?
Hmm.
So it's being, like I said earlier, it's about being able to work through the messiness to get to what we need to get to. And
Yes.
gratitude has a superpower. You work through the messiness to get to that point of gratitude.
Oh, such a powerful tool. And it's something, what you said about, hey, there's some days where it may take a day, two or three to get to that state of gratitude. And that resonates with me very, very deeply because, like you, it's how I too start my day. And as I go through, this morning, well, not morning, I had lunch about an hour and a half ago, and I went out to pick a tomato because I love them to be vine ripened.
Mhm.
And it is just a part of who I am. I never take anything from my garden or anywhere without saying thank you. And I'll go out and I'll say, hey, who would like to join me for lunch today?
I love it.
I'm not even joking. It's the truth.
Yeah.
So if it's a picking zucchinis, and I'm going at the very, very simple, all the way up to the very complex, because there are days where, and I write out my gratitudes. So I have reams and reams, like volumes and volumes of journals over the last 30 years. And sometimes they're about a day or two, I can't write because
Mm.
I'm just not there yet where I can tap into this superpower, powerful tool. But like you said, I know the gratitude is always there, but sometimes the pain, the hurt is so much. It's difficult for me to write at that time. But I know within, 72, whatever, how many I'm going to get in and I'm going to be and I like to write it out. I write it out and I speak it and I write it. So,
Absolutely. I love that. I love that.
yeah.
And I think that that makes a lot of sense is be able, again, we're talking about the ability to give ourselves the agency and the permission to express.
Hmm.
Don't do that enough. I don't think. I think
No.
there's a lot of things that are, hidden beneath the surface, unrecognized, unacknowledged, unresolved, unsaid, unexperienced, right? How are to a degree, I think many of us are still kind of cut off from our innermost experiences. And so part of this gratitude exercise, if you want to call it that, is to connect with you referenced how you refer to your inner parts. I also call them four elements: body, heart, mind, and spirit. How do we connect to them in a really meaningful way and
Hmm.
allow them to inform and guide our navigation of the world, our interactions with ourselves, our interactions with others, and how we want to show up and what our purpose is. So I think that that's really important, is to be able to express those, because the more we express them, the clearer we get in how we're engaging.
Well said, well said. And that is why this, like it's a practice for me that it is just part of my DNA. I teach it to my clients. My children is how they're raised in that state of gratitude. And that's what makes it a superpower, is that ability to go past some of those externals. And some of the externals are, as you said earlier, how societally some people will tend to minimize or tell us when it's time to move on. And they're not experiencing what we're experiencing, but somehow, from a social point of view, people feel that, yeah, you know what? Yeah, keep calm, as you said, carry on, or stiff upper lip, whatever the terms are. And so that agency is being taken away from folks when we need to go through processes to be able to use a tool, a practice, such as gratitude as a superpower. So, ooh, delightful.
Love it, Phyllis.
Um, I wanted to, so obviously this resonates with you. And how does it help you stay true to yourself? And so notice the presumption in my question. I know you're a person that's true to yourself. And therefore, folks, I can phrase the question like that. So, how does it help you stay true to yourself?
Well, I think what I love about this question is, how does it help you stay true to yourself? Because that, I think, therein is the grace of the days when you were really struggling to be who you are meant to be and how
Yeah.
you were hoping to show up. And I think that this thing, and I know, Phyllis, that I've talked to you about this before, which is that, we live in a society or a global community where there is a lot of distraction and there is a lot of misdirection, and there's a lot of telling us how we should and what we should and how much we should and what way we should and all that
Hmm.
business. And so extracting from that into gratitude gives us the opportunity to really focus on our own experience and to connect our values and how we're engaging with those experiences and how we come to them. So sometimes I wish that I had done a better job doing something. I can say I'm glad that I operated maybe 60% better than I would have a year ago, but I still have another 40% to go, right? So I
Beautiful.
can see that progress. It gives me a gauge to say, okay, it wasn't as good as I would like it to be, but it's better than it was. And I'm
Mhm.
in the process. And so I personally, I talk to my clients a lot, especially with gratitude, around the value of imperfection. We're not here to be perfect. This is not why we're here on this earth. We're not here to measure up to whatever society's standards are, or our friends' standards, or even our own standards. We're here to learn and to grow and to really live our purpose in life. And that perfection has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
So that the sooner we can release perfection, because perfection is the enemy of gratitude, right? So as soon as we can let go of that, then we can start focusing on our experience and really being authentic and being genuine and being gentle and learning and growing and really being joyful in our lives. And
Oh,
even even with the difficulties that we face, and even with the tragedies and the atrocities that we're dealing with on a global scale, we can still find that way to not just be grateful, but to use that gratitude to support us in our fight for justice in the world.
100%. That is so powerful. And I mean, I'm not surprised that you responded this way because, again, knowing you, knowing the work that you do, we both do, so many of our other friends and colleagues do this work. And there has to be something deeper within us than just that I'm going to like bulldog approach to fight. Because when we are being in a state of gratitude, let me rephrase that. When we are in a state of gratitude, or when we are coming up on being grateful for something, it means there's been a moment of pause or two that would have facilitated that awareness. Would you agree?
Absolutely, 100%. 100%,
Hmm.
Phyllis, yes. Because you can't get to the gratitude from a place of reactivity. That
Exactly.
pause is 100% necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's that pausing that then allows us to really have that gratitude that which was always being cultivated. It's just that we weren't aware of it because we're in the reactive state, but just settling down and stopping long enough to hear. You mentioned it earlier, the inner voices, the inner guides that speaking to us. And so I think we're making a case here, Aisha, for whatever practices that folks have or use, if gratitude isn't something that's coming up for them, you may want to consider adding this as one of your superpowers or as one of your essential tools. But we first need to know and understand what is gratitude, though. How do you define gratitude? What is gratitude for you?
That's a really good question, Phyllis.
Yeah,
I
it's
think,
not, yeah, go ahead.
no, finish your question. Go ahead.
I was just going to give you time. I know my friend well enough, and you need some time to think this through. So for me, when I think about gratitude, right? I'm buying time for you here. When I think about gratitude, I would define it as me, and you said it earlier multiple times. m- This, the physical Phyllis that you can see and hear and touch and so on, has allowed herself to go past the physicality and go inward into the inner, I call it my higher self. So I have my higher self and my lower self. And when I'm being reactive, I'm in my lower self. And that's where I find the state of gratitude is difficult for me. I might be feeling sorry for myself, angry. Nothing's wrong with those emotions. It's just that they don't allow me in those moments to transcend the externalities of what I might be experiencing, hearing, seeing, whatever it is, to go within. So for me, gratitude is the ability to pause, quiet ourselves, go inward, and to hear the teachings that are coming from what I call the higher part of who I am. And it's the knowing. So gratitude for me is wisdom teachings that I get from within. And it could be teachings, it could be, they're all teachings for me that then translate into me connecting maybe with a beautiful soul like yourself, where I would say, wow, what did I do to meet someone as amazing as Aisha? Or it could be someone made a referral to someone on my behalf without my knowledge. Wow, what did I do to deserve so, so, and so? But it's because I have learned to go inward and connect with that higher part of me, the innermost part of me. And it's a very sacred part. And because we're all energy, then when I'm connected to that, it means that's what I have to give out. Thus, I attract beautiful things and people in my life. Long drawn out explanation, but that's how I define it.
I love that, Phyllis. I love that. And I love also that what you're talking about is not gratitude as an end in itself. You're talking about the journey to gratitude. You're talking about all the steps that it takes to actually get to that place where you can appreciate and acknowledge
Yeah.
what you are experiencing as a part of your humanity and as a part of your soul journey. Right. So I love that. And I would say
Thank
that,
you.
very, I'm very aligned with what you're saying. I'm very much in touch with and agree with what you're sharing. I think, it's really interesting. One time, a long time, no, well, what, 2018. I remember I was in a class and I wrote, we just had like a meditation, and then we had to journal. And one line really stood out for me, and that line was, I need to free my joyful self. I had never written anything like that before. And I looked at it and I said, well, first of all, I didn't know that I had a joyful self. Now that's a kind of a sad thing, because when you are kind of in the pattern of trauma and you are constantly in this mindset and patterns and cyclical experiences of any kind of difficulty, it's very hard to access joy. And then that joyful self was somehow imprisoned.
Yeah.
That was also new for me, right? And so what that spoke to me about, and I can't say that I have completely freed my joyful self, but I'm definitely now in much better touch with my joyful self.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think that the gratitude part of that is being able to connect with the 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 soul part of myself that is here to create joy, that is
Yeah.
here to find joyfulness in the experiences that I have in life. And it's interesting when you talked about the lower self and the higher self. I would almost I would challenge you on that, and I would say that, you know, do we would can you really, is your lower self, is it not allowing you to transcend, or is it actually facilitating your transcension? Because we don't always go from, like you said, that reactive place to that transcendence place. And a lot of what society tells us is do it faster, get there, move on, do that, and that's not how life
Yeah.
works. Life doesn't
Yeah.
work like that. Life is like, okay, I need to get from point A to point B, but you know what, it might actually be a little meandering journey. It might take me not just a couple of days, it might even take me
Yeah.
like a couple of months or a year.
Or years.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's never as the crow flies, as they like to
Exactly.
say.
That's exactly it. So the gratitude piece for me is to be able to find the joy and find the fulfillment and find the wisdom, like you, exactly what you're talking about, the wisdom, the tools, the energy, the compassion. Like
Yeah.
what have I learned today? What is helping me today? What is supporting me today? How far have I come today? What's okay, this is hard, I don't like it, I don't like this feeling, but where am I going to get after I go through this? you know
Mm-hmm.
to me, that's gratitude.
Mm. It does. It is so powerful and really humbling, I find, this concept of gratitude as a superpower, because it really requires us to go to those messy places that, and I as I said, I call it lower self, higher self, and you so spot on. And it's a journey, right? From lower to higher, and sometimes from higher we drop down to the lower, because it is never a unidirectional path that we're on. And this is what makes understanding what real really resonates for each of us, and understanding why we may use gratitude as a practice. So for me, I have a very, very profound sense and understanding of why, for me, gratitude is a part of my practice. In fact, we do have tomorrow I'm facilitating a program to a group of leaders. I think I have about 20 odd leaders in it. and it is called Mind Matters: Inner World Solutions for Lasting Outer World Results. And
Beautiful.
it stems from this practice that I have. I've shared it with you off camera,
Yes.
and we're talking about, but it comes from this place of deep gratitude. So there's a tool actually. I'm a nerd. I create acronyms for everything. So it's GREIS, 5 letters, and I call it grease. It's how I grease my wheels every morning before, right? And it's gratitude is the G.
Yep.
R is release, E is embrace, GRE. I is intention, because everything I do must come from a place of intention. And the S is what I use to seal it. And there are beautiful mantras, sayings, phrases that I've learned over the years to
Yep.
seal it with. So that's what I'm getting at. And when you touched on the lower self, I honor that lower self because it helps keep me grounded.
Yep.
Can you imagine just floating on high or as a human being? And earlier you talked about perfection is the enemy of gratitude.
Absolutely. Yep. That's it. Absolutely. And you know,
Yeah.
and I think too, like the social media driven world that we live in doesn't show us the reality of the people that are there, because all we see is this kind of
Up there.
glassy-eyed, perfectionism, which is not real life. I mean, it's not real life for the majority of people,
Yeah.
and not even the people that are quote unquote thought leaders.
Yeah.
Why aren't people actually talking about the messiness? Because it's the messiness that gets us to the gratitude. And
100%.
a couple, just two other things I wanted to mention. One is that, you know, you you don't see the light without the dark.
Mhm.
You need
How
those
can
first two.
you?
You have to be whole.
Hmm.
And wholeness means accepting all parts of ourselves as equal and necessary and valued,
Yeah.
right? And that's
Mhm.
one thing. And then the other thing I think is around, you know, gratitude as something that is like it's almost ethereal, when in fact gratitude is something that comes from repetition and practice. From a neuroscience perspective, I know there's lots of research out there that tells us that the human brain is trained to have tens of thousands of thoughts during the day, and the majority of the thoughts are actually negative, right?
And the same that they
And the same,
repeat
repetitive,
over and
over and over,
over.
right?
Yeah.
So if we are not understanding, not just, this isn't just a philosophical thing, this is actually a scientific and practical process of how we retrain our brains to think differently, how we think differently, so that we
Mhm.
can shift how we're engaging and what the reality is that we're dealing with. So, when people are, I can't meditate, I don't know how to do gratitude, this is really difficult for me. I totally get it, understand it. That's natural. It's because that's how we're ingrained. That's how the society
All
teaches
these
us that
teachings.
we're not enough, and we need to buy, and we need to consume, and we need to do
Mm.
this, and we need to do that. Misdirection, right? All that stuff
Yeah.
that we don't need. How do we actively move into gratitude? By really becoming aware of our condition, of our circumstances, by accepting ourselves, our whole selves, and finding that repetitive practice of gratitude, even if you can only be grateful for one thing in a day. Oh, I got to pick up my kid on time. Okay, I've got enough food in the fridge. Okay, I've got a chance to go and see my parents for an
Mhm.
hour, right?
Mhm.
Start with even the smallest things.
Just the smallest. Doesn't have
That's
to
the
be
smallest thing,
big
right?
and, out there.
And build.
Fantastic points. And just build from there, right? And
Mm.
that actually leads me to a question I'd love to get your take on, which is really, given all the chaos that's happening globally, right? Locally and nationally, we see countries that are just absolutely being decimated. And that what comes to mind is Palestine, Gaza, Sudan, Cote d'Ivoire, all over the world. We see a lot of stuff that's going on that they're scary. And sometimes people just, I feel like I want to hide from all of it.
Yeah.
and not face it. How do you manage that delicate balance between a gratitude, a mindset that's built on gratitude, and the realities that's facing us when we look at these um, atrocities and turmoils that's happening in the world?
So for me, the thing is that the that we, there is kind of an alienation and a social disconnection that has been ingrained in us, that's been socialized in us, so that we disconnect from what's happening in other places and other communities, so that we look at it kind of from an arm's length point of view,
Mhm.
and we go about our day with, we have the quote unquote the luxury of thinking about gratitude, whereas other people don't have that particular, they don't they don't even know whether they're going to wake up alive the next day. So it
Yeah.
we can what we can do is we can recognize that when we understand our own privilege, and when we understand our own access, and we give gratitude for what we have, not as we're the only people that deserve, but that everyone deserves, that everyone deserves these human rights, everyone deserves to have the kind of resources and the access and education and right to uh, right to have food and shelter and clean water and education and so on, then we are not thinking about gratitude simply as how how does it make our life better. We'd look at gratitude as something that enables us to advocate for everyone to have the same.
You're on the same page.
Yeah.
hmm So it's why I do the work I do,
Mm.
because despite the separating of people, and you said it, because if I think it was Robin DiAngelo, she's the author of the book White
Fragility.
Fragility, Why White People Find It So Difficult to Talk About Racism.
Mm.
She said, there's a quote of hers, and I'll paraphrase, where she said, if I don't know your challenges and issues, then it's difficult for me to want to do anything or be anything that could help alleviate those difficulties. I will continue on with my day to day, just being me, right? Joe Dispenza, he talks about folks being in the habit of being themselves.
Yes.
And so I paraphrase what Robin DiAngelo said, but I think it ties in very powerfully and in a relevant way to what you've just shared, that the state of gratitude given global um, atrocities meted out on varying groups of people, that the idea behind separating us so that many, many billions of folks don't know. So we're separated by certain kinds of TV shows or shows that we can stream, and this schedule to maintain so that we don't miss series. Notice that pretty much most shows now are series, so that you're kept hooked and tethered
Yep.
to the dope that they're feeding you through that. And so if I don't know my neighbors, and therefore not understanding their culture, and then it's easy for me to go on and be in the habit of being me. So gratitude, as you rightly said, is this powerful, it's a spiritual awakening for me that reminds me of my responsibility, because nothing I have today came just because Phyllis did it on her own. I stood on the shoulders of giants who came before me, so I can be here today.
Yeah.
And that's what I use each day to remind me why, even if I don't feel like doing the work that day, I got to do the work.
Absolutely. We
Because,
are
yeah,
accountable. We are responsible.
100%. And I
Eh,
hold myself to that.
that's right.
Powerful, powerful. I want us to talk now, just maybe kind of switch and talk a bit about values, because we can't talk about gratitude without, understanding sort of what drives our state of gratitude. And again, when we talk about pause here on the Pause podcast, everything we do comes from a place of really understanding some of those daily practices that really help us care for ourselves in the 4 pillars. And so that when we're filled up, we have enough to give to others. And again, that sense of accountability. So my top 3 values are relationships, learning, and leadership. And these are things that I know right up to that second or so before I leave this earth in this form, I will still be a student of those 3 things. So it's a lifelong learning journey for me. But what are your top 3 values, and how do you, what would you say the role is that they've played in your ability to use gratitude as a superpower?
For me, I would say the first one is compassion. Compassion in that it is, for me, compassion is not always easy to exercise, but
You want to tell us a little bit, how do you define compassion?
so compassion for me is to be able to understand someone else's experience from a human standpoint, which is a non-judgmental standpoint. Doesn't mean that I agree or I disagree, but that I can understand where they're coming from because they're a human having an experience similar to experiences that I've had. So compassion means that compassion is very important for me in terms of discernment, because if we are unable to discern what someone is, I guess, how we're going to engage someone, then we can get caught up in things like sympathy, or we can get caught up in problem solving, or we can get caught up in really trying to convince someone or argue with someone about what is the right thing and what is the wrong thing, right? And I think that when we're able to discern from a compassionate standpoint, then we understand that everyone is on their own journey and that any conversation can only ever be an offering. Sometimes all we're doing is planting seeds.
Yes.
Right? Because the conversations that we have may not give us results right away. And sometimes through conversation, we change as well. It's not just our job to change other people. Sometimes we change also. So compassion for me is powerful because it empowers discernment. And discernment allows us to engage in a more meaningful and authentic and purposeful way in relationships. The second one for me would be connection. Is what is the connection that I can make with another person? And it could be a deeper relationship. It might be something that is, a reason, a season, or a time, right? It could be any one of those things. It just how can I connect with someone on a human level and understand them and just be a part of their experience or have them be a part of mine. And then the last one, I think very similar to yours, is also around growth. Is how can I grow from this? What can I learn from this? How can I move from this? How can I be moved from this? How do I continue to learn and grow?
Powerful. Yeah, I appreciate that very deeply because again, how we show up in our workplaces and communities and so on and so forth are actually very heavily influenced by our values. So values are principles that we live by, and we use them on a daily basis over and over. And as Stephen Covey rightly said, they become valuable to us. So we say there are values. And so these principles are the rocks on which we build our beingness and the way we show up in society. So that's just beautiful. There's another aspect to pause, which is, again, looking at ways in which we constantly are mindful about how we are cultivating who we are, like the state of gratitude that we're talking about. And we know that there are just lots and lots of different faith practices around the world, and some are based on, say, a God, others are based on universal principles, some science, you name it. The gamut is wide. But what's been the most significant influence, would you say, Aisha, for you, shaping your mindset of gratitude as a superpower? And maybe a little bit about how these experiences support your ability to use gratitude as a superpower.
Well, I can't say that I'm really a religious person, but I'm a very spiritual person.
Mhm.
And I've always had a connection, I would say, with ancestors,
Yes.
higher powers, and spirit guides. And that has been the case for me since I was a child. And I think that, there have been experiences that I've had uh, where I know that I have been guided by a force or a power that is outside of myself, something that has protected me, or something that's taken care of me, something that has given me the guidance to move forward in a different way and choose a
Mhm.
different path, even if it was a very difficult path at the time. And I'm always, I guess, connected with source on some level, whatever name you want to give it. Um, and I think that that is that the thing about gratitude is that it's only gratitude if there's humility involved,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? Because otherwise it's arrogance. And
Mm.
so we want to make sure that what we're experiencing is thankfulness with humility,
With humility. Yeah.
humility, and
Yeah.
knowing that I'm a small part of something that's much bigger than myself. And I loved how earlier you talked about, there's so many of us who are out there doing this work, this empowering work, this work to give people back their agency and their voices and their power. It is humbling, and it's an honor to be a small part of something that is much, much greater than myself.
100%. 100%. I tell you, we're friends for many, many reasons. And like you, I am not religious. I'm deeply spiritual, and I do have guides. I have guides that I don't know directly and guides that I have known, one of which is my father. My dad passed when I was about 2.5 years old. So I don't know my dad from that perspective. And yet my father has always been, his spirit, his, right, the energy of him has always been around, came into my life in just so many important situations. And then I also have those that beings, I would say, that I've never seen, but I know they exist because of my deep spiritual connection. And I will hear voices that will say, as you said, Phyllis, don't go down that path.
Yeah,
Take this one.
yeah.
Yeah, I won't go too much. It's probably another podcast show, but yeah, I 100% I can relate
I
to
love that.
that.
Of the power of guides cannot be overstated. I,
Mm-mm.
yeah,
And I've been on this earth for many decades now. I have proven that to be true, like very true for me for sure. And I'm hearing that it's true for you too. So we're coming to that part where I wanted to ask you, there are a couple more things I want to ask you, but one of which is sort of how are you intentional about moments of pausing, stopping, remaining still, just being still, right? Being mindful. Like, how do you cultivate that intentionality?
imperfectly.
Yeah.
Let's be honest,
Yes.
imperfectly, not not all the time, not always well, but
Okay. Sounds like you're human. Would you say that's correct?
well, I mean that is the thing ultimately, right? The thing is that there are some moments where I can stop a conversation and say, just a second, that's not what I meant to say.
Oh,
Or I can say, just a moment, I need to take a little break. Can we just reconvene in 5 minutes or in 10 minutes or
Hmm.
tomorrow or something? And then there are some days where I will just say what I need to say and then wish that I had said it differently and then try
Okay.
and go back and say, can we try this again? Because I think that's the thing. Again, it's the process. There are going to be some, as we unlearn these patterns that keep us attached to, let's say, scarcity or insecurity or lack of confidence or trauma or grief or anything that stop us from being authentic and listening and making that connection and really leading with the values of, for me, connection, compassion, and growth. If
Yeah.
I'm not acting in alignment with my values, um, then I, and I know it, if I can catch myself, then I will stop myself. And sometimes I don't catch myself until afterwards. And then I
Okay.
have to go back
Yeah.
and try and, mend whatever
Hmm.
has happened, whatever harm has happened from me.
Hmm. I see why we're friends because you've just described very beautifully and accurately my path to this intentionality of being mindful. And what I know, though, is at the core is a commitment to those values,
That's
relationships for me, right? Learning and leadership. So, yes, no problem for me. I recognize I messed up. I'm going to apologize deeply and ask if I can, as you say, can we do this again? When you're ready, just let me know. I'll be
right.
happy to come along with you. So super, super appreciative of that. So what, if any, final practical tips about using gratitude as a superpower would you have for our community, Aisha?
I would say what we talked about earlier, which is if you find it hard to have gratitude for whatever reason that is, your trauma, your grief, your upbringing, your socialization, your own mindset, remember that it's neuroscience is involved. There's all kinds of reasons why you may be stuck. So just start small with little steps, but do it every day. Do
Hmm.
it every time you can remember. Try and find moments in the day where you can appreciate something about your life that, oh, that was a great cup of coffee, or I didn't have any traffic on my commute, or, you know, I know there's a lot of work to still be done in the world, but I'm grateful today to be alive and to be well and for my family to be well. Just start with the little things and then build and be gentle with yourself because some days you're not going to feel gratitude. Some days are going to be tough and you just have to kind of be gentle with yourself and walk through it.
Hmm. So that's where the compassion comes in, right? Towards
So,
self. Just
yeah,
as though we give to others, we first need to be
compassion first for self.
compassionate.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because you can't be
Hmm.
compassionate to other people if you're not compassionate with
Not
yourself.
at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, not at all. And I think one other thing, as you listed those practices, I'd like to add would be community, because having met you, I believe we're entering our fourth or fifth year of knowing, getting to know each other. Isn't that
Yeah.
beautiful?
Yes.
And I tell you, being in community with you, Aisha, has just helped me become a better person in terms of just the ability, as you say, to be more, come inward, like go inward even more and do those inner reflections and just be able to communicate from a place of, again, the relationships, the value of the relationship, the value of what I feel that I have learned from previous or current, and lead my way through that. So you've actually helped me, and so is the community that I have formed with you that's really helped me. So that's one other thing that I would add is find a community. You could be a community of just two people. Doesn't have to be a lot of people.
Yeah,
Community
absolutely.
of two
And
people.
I'm so grateful to you for the friendship and for the guidance and for the leadership and for the love and the support that you've always provided. That community, when it's mutually shared and respectfully shared and authentically
Oh yes.
shared, is very empowering. And I think that's
Hmm.
too, when you talk about community, I think it's also, it is really important to find the people that you know are aligned with your values and that are aligned with your perspective and who want the same things, because otherwise we do sometimes run into the kind of misdirection and distraction that we're trying to avoid
Hmm.
parts of.
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, I definitely appreciate that.
And just for community's sake, I just want you to know if you ever go on YouTube and you Google Aisha and Phyllis talk about, you'll see we are pretty awesome friends. And there are times we see things a bit differently. And what Aisha just said, the mutual love, the mutual respect for each other, and the really that our North Star. And our North Star is all about what are we building and giving to our community. So even though I might see things a little differently from her and vice versa, we tend to come together because of that core guiding North Star. So just look us up on YouTube. Aisha and Phyllis talk about, and of course, watch this podcast once it's posted. Alrighty, so we're at the end, but there are two final things that I'd like to invite you to join me with, Aisha. One of which is just something lighthearted. Just going to ask you a few general questions for folks to kind of get to know you a little bit better.
Oh my goodness.
So
Okay,
yeah,
I'm ready.
so you are in say any city that you've been to.
Mhm.
What's the kind of food that you source out first when you arrive in a city that's not your home city?
Oh, oh my goodness. I'm ridiculous when it comes to food. I'm really very moody when it comes to food. I have to decide what do I feel like eating today. But right now, my go-to is Persian food.
You and I
Persian,
had it was a Persian meal we had when
I
we met
think.
up.
Where did we might have been. Yeah,
Because
Persian inspired. Yeah.
yeah, it was Persian inspired. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Persian food.
I, I love it. Love,
Yeah.
love, love. Okay, so you have a weekend and realize there's nothing in the calendar. Free, open.
Yep.
What's the first thought that comes to mind in terms of how you're gonna be in that free weekend?
I would probably take my paints or my sketchbook and sit out on the porch and just do some art.
Mm, and
Yeah.
that's you, very artistic. So you are in a traditional library. So it's not
Okay.
online, it's a real library with
With
real
real books and
books.
everything. Okay. Yes.
What kind of, which section are you going to? Like, what do you
Well,
like to read?
first of all, I would go to the library staff and thank them for their incredible work keeping
Gratitude,
the library.
folks.
Yes,
Hmm.
keeping the library going. And then I would probably go to, um, let's see, I just really like to learn. I just want to learn new stuff. So I would go to anything that's like growth, self-development.
So you're in the self-development
Yeah,
area.
that's me. It's weird. It's boring, right? I'm a nerd.
No,
I'm a nerd that way too. It's just like,
we're nerdy that way.
yeah, exactly.
And so I would go there and I'd also head over to the section on death and dying because I'm fascinated by death.
Well, it's the ultimate, destination. So yes, I understand that for sure.
Yeah. And so what's one thing that people would never associate or say, hey, Aisha is this? Like, what is that one thing that can be spoken publicly?
I like that. I like that caveat that can be spoken publicly. Um, well, I mean, I think people know that well, I don't know if everyone knows. Some people know that I'm a musician and a songwriter and a singer. So that's one thing. But I'm also actually over the years I've become a bit of an introvert, which is really interesting because I've been an extrovert most of my life,
Yeah,
and now I feel like, oh, I need to
yeah.
replenish and
That's how
you know,
I'm feeling too. Oh my God, that's a second podcast topic there. I'm gonna write that
yeah,
down.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Powerful. I appreciate that. So here's our final parting question, my friend.
Okay.
You were given two options. One, whether you'd like to spotlight on change and whether that change is coming from an organization, a project, or a community member, they're contributing in a positive way to their community, or you have a story exchange where you share a brief story that touched you, something to inspire the listeners and reflect on their own stories and connections. Which one did you
Mhm,
choose?
mhm. I chose the latter,
Hmm.
second one. So this in 2003, I joined the anti-war movement. This was as the war on terror was unfolding. As
Hmm.
someone who is from Pakistan, has a background of you know, my family is Muslim. Uh, Obviously, I'm South Asian, so that watching that unfold was very difficult for me to just sit back and do nothing. And I joined the anti-war movement, and I was very fortunate to have met a lot of very incredible activists and very wonderful souls. One of whom was a good friend of mine, uh, Pam Pam Johnson, and she at the time was partners with a gentleman by the name of John Bell. And John, Pam was, I immediately recognized her as a soul sister. And so in South Asian tradition, I began to call John Jija, which in South Asian tradition means your brother by marriage. And,
Hmm.
uh, a decade later, when Pam and John were not Pam and John anymore, John was still my Jija. And he was my Jija for more than 20 years, 21 years. And he was someone that I did a lot of social justice work with. And we went to meetings together. We did protests together. We organized events together. We did a radio show on University of Toronto Radio, CIUT, called Voices of the Movement. And for five odd years, we interviewed people and we talked to them, and we made really great friends with some of those people. And then we had a very strong social relationship. And John was one of those people that, if you saw him on the street, you wouldn't look twice at him, to see. He wasn't, he was a very charismatic person when he was talking. But if he walked by you on the street, you would just think, oh, he's just a normal average person. But he was someone who was, he, when you told him something, he remembered it. When you shared something that was happening in your life, he was attentive, he was engaged, he gave you honest to goodness feedback on what he thought. He was invested in your happiness. He supported whatever I was doing, even in the times where I was not confident in myself, I wasn't sure of myself. He advocated to me for me when I wasn't able to do that for myself. And John passed away earlier this year. And I recently spoke at his celebration of life. And what he taught me was to unapologetically be who you are, to live by your values, to support your community, to never ever give up, and to never stop living life. And I never would have met him for the anti-war movement. So you never know who is the person that is going to change a fundamental part of who you are, that's going to give you all the things that you need in a moment, in a situation, in a challenge. Somebody that's going to be there. You got to take those chances. You have to go out there and connect with people, and you have to love them, and you have to let yourself be loved. And that was John Bell for me, and always will be. I'm so grateful to have known him, to have been his friend, and to have been his sister for over 21 years.
Wow. If that isn't gratitude, I don't know what is. And look at the uncanny way that brought the anti-war movement. Had it not been for the war, you two wouldn't have met. Probably wouldn't have met.
Yeah.
So that's a beautiful story, Aisha, and it's one that just really, I would say, put the icing on the cake of gratitude as a superpower. And so I want us to just join our hands together, bow to each other, bow to the light that's in you. Namaste. I am so thankful, so grateful for you as a friend, an educator, an advocate, a human being. I thank you, my sister. I
I'm
thank you.
so grateful for
Namaste.
you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity, and everything that you have shared with me, I reflect back to you with love and gratitude and reciprocity. And I'm so, so grateful for you. Thank you so much, Phyllis. And I hope that all of our listeners today have been able to take something away from this podcast that they are able to nourish themselves with.
That's my intention as
Yes.
well. So thank you, my
Thank
friend.
you.
Thank you.